IPS, I'm conscious that, you know, some people have heard about it, some people haven't. IPS stands for Individual Placement and Support. It's an intensive employment support program for individuals with mental health difficulties. And the program is guided by 8 key principles. So if you've never heard of IPS before and you're wondering what it is, these 8 key principles are really a guide in terms of what it looks like on a very real level. So first of all, we talk about zero exclusion policy. So what we mean by this is that the only criteria for someone to engage with IPS is that the client has expressed an interest in sourcing employment. There's no job readiness criteria. There's no traffic lighting system in terms of yellow, amber, green, nothing like that. What we're talking about here is someone who's got a real keen interest in employment. And this comes to one of the fundamental aspects of IPS, which is the idea of placing someone and then training. So we have a fundamental belief as employment specialists in the capacities of the clients we work with. And the idea is to support them into an employment opportunity, to give them access to the IPS program, and then provide them with the support when they're in the job. The whole program is based on client preferences. So from the initial referral to the initial needs assessment and career profiling, through to what kind of employers an individual would like to work with, what kind of environment, what kind of work hours, all of that is guided by the client. Now, it's a collaborative approach. The employment specialist is working hand in hand with the client to help brainstorm and come up with different ideas and different approaches. But it is fundamentally driven by the client. It's what they want. It moves at the pace that they feel comfortable moving at. And it's really about finding the right match for that particular client. So they have a huge amount of autonomy in terms of how they experience IPS. Employment specialists are integrated with the mental health teams. So this is quite new, and it's something we found when we joined in with our teams, that having a dedicated employment person on the team was quite a new departure, and it was a really exciting departure for members of the team. I think traditionally this might have fallen to maybe the occupational therapist, who has, you know, 1,000,001 other things that they're worried about and really don't have the time to be going out and building those relationships with employers. So we're fully functioning members of the multidisciplinary team. We attend weekly meetings where we discuss different clients, potential referrals. We're involved in the clinical discussion in terms of how they can be supported broadly by the team. And that's one of the big kind of key aspects of IPS, is that fact that we are there with the multidisciplinary team, and we have a huge input in terms of I suppose, advertising IPS and the efficacy of it. And then, you know, lots of conversations with key workers and different members of the team to try and increase the number of people who are being referred to the service. One of the key elements of IPS is the idea of a rapid job search. So every employment specialist knows that from the moment they begin working with a client, we have kind of like a 4-week window, and the goal at the end of that 4 weeks is that we've engaged face-to-face with an employer, discussing a very real job opportunity for the client who we've begun working with. And again, that's quite new, it's quite proactive, and it creates a sense of urgency, which from my experience has been quite beneficial for the clients we work with. There's a real tangible focus. There's a real sort of belief, again, in the inherent capacities that people have. And part of the role of the job coach is to encourage individuals to actually see their skills, their experiences, and the capacity that they have, that the employment specialist fundamentally believes in. Employer engagement is another key aspect of IPS. So the employment specialist spends upwards of 60% of their time out in the community. So this isn't sitting in an office somewhere with any of the teams. This is out meeting clients in coffee shops. It's out engaging with employers, whether it's cold calling employers, whether it's setting up meetings with employers. We spend a huge amount of our time linking in with local and regional employers. And what we're trying to do is, first of all, we're trying to generate an awareness for the fact that this service exists. And then what we're trying to do is create job opportunities for clients that we might have at that point in time, or clients that we expect to have in the future. And there's a big role there in terms of trying to get the buy-in from employers to support the work we're doing, and on a very, very simple level to try and tackle the stigma that still surrounds trying to support individuals to source employment. There's a focus on competitive employment. I think this is a really powerful message to the clients we work with. When we're sourcing job opportunities, we're not talking about a set aside role within an organization. We're talking about real live job vacancies available on the live job market. And so our clients are up against Joe Public when they're going for any particular position. And I think that's a real powerful message to the client, because again, what we're saying is we fundamentally believe in your skills, your capabilities, and what you bring to the table for any employer. And that's backed up by the fact that, you know, these are all live job vacancies. It's competitive employment. It's about you getting back to work like anyone else in the workforce, and having the support around you to be successful. The final thing we do is we provide some benefits counselling, and I suppose that's within the context of a broader career plan that we put together for all the clients we work with. And this is things like, you know, if someone's going back to work and they only want to work part-time, they might wonder, well, what impact does that have on my medical card, or what impact does that have on one can work, and then how much they might receive from their disability benefit if that's what they happen to be on. So we support all our clients with these kind of conversations to make sure that when they do go into an employment opportunity, they're fully informed and they're fully prepared for how that's going to affect their current lifestyle and what they're used to. So hopefully that gives you an insight in terms of the kind of key principles that guide the IPS approach. So what does that actually look like in practice though? So you kind of have the theoretical aspect of what IPS is all about, but what does it look like day to day? This is what we'd like to think of as the standard journey for someone who engages with IPS. So after the referral has come through, the client will engage in a vocational assessment with the employment specialist. So this is a document that I suppose stimulates conversation, and we talk about things like, what are your experiences? What are your values? What are you passionate about? What are your hobbies and interests? What did you like about previous employment opportunities? What didn't you like about your previous employment? And what we try to do is we really try and find out, like, who are you as an individual? What makes you tick? What are you passionate about? What gets you excited? A very fundamental question is, you know, if you could be doing, what would you like to be doing in the morning? If you were getting out of bed, you know, the alarm clock's going off at 6:30, what would you like to be doing? What would get you excited? And these sometimes are questions that we're probably all guilty of not considering enough. And certainly I find with the clients that I work with, these are refreshing questions to be asking. And then also what we're saying is that we'll support you to try and achieve those goals, whatever they happen to be. So this vocational assessment is a real holistic view of the individual, all their experiences, putting it all together. And then hopefully what we get from that is a couple, 2 or 3 job preferences that the individual's really happy and really comfortable with trying to go out now and source. In terms of CV development, you know, we help with targeting CVs towards different industries. If someone wants to work in retail, then their CV naturally should be very different to someone who wants to work in a manufacturing environment. And so we provide the real practical support in terms of trying to update CVs and making sure that they're targeted towards particular industries. I've touched on the employer engagement side of things. Like I said, we're building relationships all the time with employers. And so, you know, the hope, and it's proven to be the case on occasion, is that when we begin working with a client, we might already have an employer that we think might be a really good fit for an individual. And of course, it's all based on the individual's preferences, but we build those really strong relationships with employers. And that's the employment specialist going out and meeting with companies and trying to carve job opportunities. And then also there's an onus on the client themselves to go out and start job searching and start creating opportunities for themselves. Like I said, it's a real collaborative process, and that's the way we want it to be. We help again with very practical things like online job applications and assessments, filling out questionnaires, application forms for different types of job vacancies. Also what we do is we provide interview skills development, and this is all on the basis of need. So some clients want that real hands-on support in terms of preparing for interviews and going through questions. And other clients, you know, they're comfortable and they're happy and they're content in terms of how they'd approach that situation. So, you know, the support is only provided if that's what they want. I suppose the last thing we would do then is provide the on-the-job support. So this is linking in with the client on a consistent basis to make sure they're happy and they're comfortable in their role. It's constant communication with the employer to make sure that the individual is settling in well with the team, that they're enjoying the environment, and also to try and see if there's any way at all that we can help make sure that it's a really successful match. And if there are any issues, there may be issues around attending appointments, you know, staggered breaks, whatever it happens to be, we provide all of that support to a client. And so I think it's really comforting for the clients to know that the journey doesn't end just because you get into a job. you could argue actually that a lot of the real work actually starts once you get into the job, because again, coming back to this idea of placing someone and then training them, the real massive support happens when someone gets into a job, and we really want to try and make sure it's a successful match. So that gives you a little bit of a sense of, I suppose, what IPS looks like in practice. Again, it's a fluid process. So sometimes someone goes into a job quite early and finds out it's not for them, and they revert back to, let's go back to the vocational assessment. Let's see what we need to change. Let's see how our preferences might have changed based on your last employment experience. So it's a very fluid process, and you can jump between stages, but that gives you a sense of what the kind of standard progression might look like for someone. So let's talk about the benefits of IPS, and I suppose more specifically, what makes IPS unique. Now you'll probably see that there's a common trend between the 8 guiding principles for IPS and then actually what the benefits look like. So we talk about accessibility. So like I said, for anyone who's engaged with the mental health teams, all they have to do is express an interest in employment. And this sometimes might come organically from the individual, or it might be encouraged by a key worker or someone else on the multidisciplinary team. But at that point, a referral should be filled out, and the individuals should be having a discussion with me about IPS within a couple of days. So it's hugely accessible for those clients who want to avail of the service. Like I said, there's no job readiness criteria, and this has been a huge sort of message that we carry when we're in discussions with anyone about IPS, and also when we're going back and having discussions with the multidisciplinary team. We're really passionate about not deciding whether individuals are ready to go to work or not. If an individual is really motivated and wants to source employment, then it's our job to provide them with the support and the opportunity to engage in IPS to see if we can make that become a reality. It also leads to quicker referrals. So like I said, the referral process is really quick and easy. Any member of the team can get onto myself straight away, and a referral can happen within a matter of hours. And within, like I said, a couple of days, you're already having a conversation with the client about IPS. IPS is 100% client-led. From the initial referral through to the vocational profile, identifying job opportunities, identifying employers, what kind of environment you want to work in. It's all driven by the client. Like I said, it's a collaborative process, and there's lots of discussions that go on and brainstorming, but the client has complete control over what their experience of IPS is like, down to what support looks like. So for some clients, they want us engaging with employers on a regular basis on their behalf. For other clients, they're happy to do that piece themselves, and they want to take control of that. And so it's a real empowering approach to supporting people into employment. The client really does have the reins here, and it's up to us to kind of honour their wishes. A huge benefit to IPS is the collaboration between services. So I've discussed already, myself and Marie would be fully fledged members of the multidisciplinary teams, and that allows us to have the informal discussions that happen in the office between key workers and BFT workers, psychology, where we're constantly pushing the message of IPS and trying to generate as much awareness as possible. And often out of those informal conversations, you'll have referrals that emerge. The other thing is we lean on the collective wisdom of the team. So I have lots of discussions with key workers, occupational therapists about, look, this is what I'm thinking. These are the kind of conversations I've had with my client. What's your input here? What do you think would be a good approach for this individual? And again, so it's a real collaborative process between myself, between the client, and between the team as a whole. The other side of this is the fact that obviously I'm a job coach with employability. So I also have the expertise of a team of job coaches who have experience in terms of building relationships with employers, who have experience in terms of placing individuals who have lots of different challenges, be that physical or mental health challenges. So it's the kind of marriage between those two services that really makes IPS unique and allows us to really kind of be successful in terms of supporting individuals to source employment opportunities, and then it's all about supporting their recovery as well. I've spoken about the fact that the IPS is time unlimited, and this is an amazing offering to clients. So there's not too many programs where you could say the support will be there for you as long as you want it. It's a remarkable thing to offer someone. I know with employability that the job coach normally offers support for about 18 months. In some situations that might be extended, but generally from the time you start working with employability, there's a clock counting down. That's not the case for an individual who's utilizing the support of IPS. Yeah, it's just an incredible offering, and what it means is it allows people to try things. So, you know, the normal conversations I'm having with clients are, you know, I don't know what to do. I don't know what job opportunity I want to move into. I don't know what would work for me. And what I encourage people to do is to try things. Try what it's like to work in a retail environment, or try what it's like to work in a manufacturing environment, or whatever it happens to be. And with that time unlimited support, what it means is that if the first opportunity proves not to be the right one for you, then we can come back to the drawing board. The support is still there. We take the learnings from that experience and we move on, and we're more informed now when we're looking for our next opportunity. So I think the time unlimited thing is fantastic support for people. And what I found is clients dip in and out of the service when they feel like they need it, which is great. We've spoken about how fast paced it is. Like I said, within 4 weeks, the goal of every employment specialist is to be having that face-to-face conversation with an employer about a very real job opportunity. And I think what that does is it gives the client a real sort of focus and a real emphasis in terms of, you know, let's try and make something happen here. It's really tangible. You can see the progress, you know, as you move through the initial assessment, through to preparing for job interviews and approaching employers. You can really feel and touch the progress that's happening. I think that's really powerful for the clients who engage in IPS. The final sort of standout benefit, certainly from my own experience, is the idea of employer engagement. So just on a very practical level, for those clients who want this kind of support, having someone to go and advocate on behalf of you and talk about all the skills and qualities and characteristics that make you such a strong potential employee, it makes a huge difference. Going out there, talking to employers, building those relationships and trying to create that supportive environment that will support the individual's recovery as a whole makes a massive difference, I think, to clients. And I think they see it as a huge benefit of engaging in IPS. So hopefully you've got a sense of what IPS is, what it looks like, and what are some of the key benefits for the individuals who engage in IPS. Before I hand over to my colleague Marie and Dominic, I just wanted to give you a sense of one of my own clients who kindly shared a testimonial of their experience working with IPS. So what she said is this: with the IPS, I managed to get a new temporary opportunity through which I managed to build my self-esteem, build trust in myself by watching myself doing brilliantly in a completely new capacity I never worked in before. I also built trust in others and earned the communication skills. This opportunity helped me to grow and develop. With that, I'll hand over to Marie, who's going to facilitate a discussion with Dominic about his experience with IPS.
Hi Eric, thanks very much for that. Hi Dominic, how are you?
I'm very well, Marie, and how are you?
I'm very good, thanks. First of all, I want to say thanks so much for coming on today and joining us for this conversation and discussing your experience of the IPS process. No problem. Okay, great. So will I just get started? Dive straight in?
Yeah.
Perfect. So can you just tell me, what does employment mean for you?
I suppose your kind of idea of what it is evolves over time, but you know, I suppose you spend a lot of time, if you're working full time, you could be doing it 40 hours a week. I suppose a lot of it is linked to your kind of sense of maybe identity in certain respects, your sense of self-worth. You know, I suppose if you maybe you could be working from the age of 18, maybe early 20s up until your 60s. So it's a large chunk of your life and you spend a lot of time doing it. So it is going to be linked a lot to your kind of, I suppose, your sense of identity, your sense of self-worth. You would like it to be a vocation, not just strictly a kind of a means to an end, and that it's just a salary and a salary alone. I suppose you just like to kind of see yourself being happy in the role, that kind of thing, I suppose, really, you know, that it's not just going in for a while, clocking out, that it's something that you kind of like doing, that it's something that's a part of yourself, you know, something like that, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think what you said there is something that can resonate with all of us. I think, you know, that function of employment that you're talking about, you know, that it's meaningful, you know. I think that's something that can resonate to all of us, because I know employment means different things to different people. We all want it to be meaningful, really, don't we?
I know for sure. I mean, I suppose, you know, I've had a couple of jobs in the past where yeah, I wouldn't have enjoyed them too much, and it does impact in a negative way upon your kind of sense of self-worth, your mental health, and so on. Whereas if you're in a job that you kind of feel that you're getting up in the morning and you're maybe kind of enjoying it, you're in a nice environment, you're enjoying what you're doing, yeah, it makes all the difference, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And just to move on, I suppose, to talk about like the IPS Supported Employment Programme. Would you ever have been involved in supported employment programs before, or is this your first time accessing a service like that?
No, first time. I was never involved with anything like it before. So yeah, it was my first time. Yeah.
Okay. And how did you find, I suppose, referring into the service and accessing it? Like, what was that process like?
No, it was pretty straightforward, really. I suppose I would have been, I suppose, accessing mental health services in Tusney and Ballincollig and Cork, and through that the RISE program. So it was part of the RISE program. That's how it was kind of how I came upon it. And yeah, through that, I suppose, met you and started engaging with you and kind of looking at different opportunities. So no, it was very easy to access and I suppose user friendly, if you like. So first time availing of a service like this, and yeah, I found it very, very helpful and easy to access for sure. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And just about the service itself, what, I suppose, and your experience of it, what did you find that was beneficial to you and also may not have been beneficial?
I suppose obviously about a year ago, I would have been unwell and would have been hospitalized and all that kind of stuff, and it's a traumatic event in one's life when that happens. And you're not really, maybe you're in a bit of a muddle, you're not thinking clearly, it's an existential sort of a crisis, really. So just trying to kind of, and then, as I said earlier, work is a big part of a person's kind of sense of self-worth, identity, and just trying to kind of get an idea, okay, what is it that I actually want to do? Because I mean, the jobs that I did have previously, looking back on it, they made me unhappy and contributed to me becoming unwell. So just having to kind of recalibrate, really, and yeah, just kind of challenging things in a kind of and having those conversations about what it is that I actually wanted to do and reconnecting with that, and challenging things. As I said, I mean, it kind of doesn't become crystal clear straight away, but from talking to you over the course of a few weeks, you start to kind of get an idea as to, look, okay, what direction I need to go in, the mistakes maybe that I was making in terms of jobs that I was in and stuff like that. And just, I suppose, having those conversations as well, your confidence builds, because when you're through something like what I was through, your confidence takes a big hit. And the thought of going back to work, going back into the workplace when you're very anxious and so on, can seem very daunting. So just, I suppose, talking with you, meeting with you even on a week-to-week basis, you feel like you're moving in the right direction incrementally. So that was one of the kind of the main things, really, just kind of building that confidence and kind of getting a clearer idea as to the direction I needed to go on and what I needed to do, I think.
Yeah. So really, just kind of, I suppose what you're saying is that space to explore your options was vital for you, really, was it?
Definitely, yeah. Something that I found very helpful, just kind of that space, as you said, that non-judgmental space to kind of explore your options and build your confidence up again. That's, absolutely found that very helpful and beneficial.
Okay. And is there anything, I suppose, that you'd like to see about the program, any kind of services you'd like to change or any improvements? Because I suppose for us, really, what's important is feedback and knowing what we can do differently to reach a better standard,
Of course, yeah. I mean, being honest about it, I've been very happy with the service. There isn't really anything that I could say. I mean, looking back to, I suppose, when I first started engaging with the service last September to where I am now, I mean, back then, going back into employment seemed a kind of a distant prospect, but I'm back in employment, happy with where I'm working. So, I mean, there isn't really anything that I could say that would be a negative or a kind of a black mark or anything like that. I don't know. I mean, look, I'm speaking in a personal capacity, of course. But no, I mean, I've been very, very happy with the service and I found it very, very helpful. And, I wouldn't be where I am without it, to be honest.
Yeah, and like you said, this is your experience. Other people are going to have different experience of the IPS program and different thoughts about it. So, I do appreciate you coming on and saying all that. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about the program or your experience of it?
No, not as such really. I suppose one of the things that I did kind of find helpful was even meeting you in a setting that wasn't a clinical setting, just meeting you out for a coffee and things like that. Kind of, yeah, I even found that kind of helpful, because if you're in a clinical setting, sometimes you might feel like a patient or something like that. So I just found kind of meeting you out, having a coffee, that was more relaxed. Again, just speaking from a personal capacity, and kind of when you're more relaxed, maybe you're kind of more inclined to kind of, I suppose, find things easier to talk about, or happen upon things that are kind of more insightful. And yeah, that's something, just the kind of engaging with people, having a coffee and all of that. I just found that very helpful from a personal perspective.
Yeah, and God knows we love our coffee.
Well, the coffee isn't great, Marie.
We can't be saying things like that. Okay, so Dominic, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I am going to actually hand you back to Eric now, who is going to conclude with a few statistics. All right?
No problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Marie. And listen, Dominic, we've not met before, except for kind of just this morning. Thanks so much for sharing your own experience. I think it really resonates with people when you hear someone who's actually had the direct experience of the service. So we can talk about it all day long, but you've actually lived the experience of it. So thanks so much.
You're more than welcome. No problem at all, Eric.
So, like Marie said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the outcomes that we've managed to achieve. Like I said, we're about eight months in to IPS really kind of coming together in the way that we had envisaged it. So, I suppose since we've started, between myself and Marie, we've had 39 referrals to IPS. We've had, in terms of the clients that have engaged in IPS, the number is 23. And I suppose the reason why there's I suppose the difference in the two numbers there is because there's a lot of conversations that happen with clients who might be referred to us, who for one reason or another decide that it's not the right time for them to engage in IPS. And again, that's entirely their decision. Or else they've decided to go a different route, whether that's to chase educational opportunities, or there might be some other extenuating circumstances. People have moved away perhaps. So out of the 23 people that have engaged in IPS, there's been 22 job opportunities created to date. In terms of the total number of clients that have actually secured employment, 14 different clients have secured employment. So some of these clients will have secured more than one role during their time, and that's why you have the difference between the 22 job opportunities and the 14 as the number of clients. In terms of engagement to successful employment, we're at about 61% at the moment. So for those who engage in IPS and are really motivated to source employment, 61% of them so far have managed to secure a supportive employment placement. So look, it's early doors. Like I said, we're only 8 months in, but it's been a really strong start, I think, for us. And you know, the one thing I'd say about any outcomes that you have in any of these programs, it's all down to the clients and their willingness to really source an employment opportunity and their willingness to engage with IPS. And then, you know, we can support as much as we possibly can, but clients, you know, they really take ownership of their experience of IPS. Finally, just to add some sort of conclusion remarks, there's a significant and growing body of evidence supporting the efficacy of IPS. The last slide actually on the presentation has a few links to some of that research. One piece of research suggested on average that participants secure employment through IPS 61% of the time versus your standard local vocational services 23% of the time. And this was a paper published by the Centre for Mental Health in 2009. I suppose just to conclude, it's our fundamental belief as employment specialists that IPS should be viewed as a fundamental aspect of mental health service provision. We think it needs to become as valued in intervention as behavioural family therapy, as psychology, as peer support. We think it plays a transformational role in terms of people's ability to manage their own mental health and their experience of day-to-day life. And we, you know, would be huge advocates of IPS and the difference it's making in people's lives currently. And, you know, we just really, really want to see this rolled out, you know, to every mental health team in the country. With that, we thought we'd end on sort of an inspirational quote or something that we feel like reflects, I suppose, our values and our view of IPS. So we borrowed a quote here from Confucius. What he says is, "Those who think they can and those who think they can't are both usually right. The role of IPS is to support people to think they can." And with that, I will hand back to Fiona.